bad novels and worthless verses, imbecile systems of philosophy and platitudinous moralizings. To read them was to be ashamed for the whole human race. Nature is monstrously unjust. There is no substitute for talent. Ah, the masochistic pleasures of the book reviewer. Point counterpoint. Even better than the 58th reread. Like a good working man's whiskey, the malice only evolves. What can top this feeling? Finding the billions of people who enjoy this book just as much as I do. Ah, the internet, where people transcend personality and meld with ideas. Ah, Goodreads, where only the most fastidious connoisseurs of prose congregate. Won't be long before I come across a high priest of the Huxley cult. I would have rather punched myself in the dick than read this book.
One guy says A, the other guy says no B, and then unending dialogue about each point on subjects that have no interest in, no real story. This is how much of the book is. Thus, point counterpoint. It finally gets good in the last 1/5 of the book because finally there are some interesting things that happen. I wish that was how the book started.
Welcome to the second episode of Underground Radio. I am Ravishan Wijemanne. Should you care about book reviews or art reviews of any kind? Ostensibly, a review is an expert verdict. But if that were the only function of a review, no one would bother, especially with book reviews, because the only competence needed to judge a book is literacy, or a keyboard, or a camera, an even lower standard. Same goes for other mediums that have a higher skills threshold. I doubt if anyone finished a single guitar lesson before giving a Nirvana album 5 stars, which is fine. Why should you let anyone school you in your preferences? This was the case even in the good old days, when elites dictated taste. Only weak minds could be bullied into shame. The rest of us laughed at the naked emperor. So should the review bow down to mob opinion? No. If you don't let one presumptuous pundit to make up your mind, you shouldn't let thousands of them to do so either. So why do we still read reviews, retweet dunks or upvote memes? At this point, you may ask whether art can be judged at all. Is it just personal preference, separating Harry Potter from Lolita? Is there an objective metric to assess art? Yes and no. No, because traditional objective metrics that we have are based on utility. For instance, a blunt knife is objectively bad because it fails in its purpose. But what about a worn-out Persian knife with an elaborately carved hilt? You see, utilities may be embellished to the point of art, but the pure art component of those things has no utility. And even when its utility wears out, the art survives. Take a novel, for example. You could reduce it to a utilitarian core, its most basic ingredient. The plot, the story. Take the plot of the first Harry Potter book. The prophesied preteen prevents the barely banished Dark Lord from taking true form. The Dark Lord boo-ha-has away, vowing to return. A trope as old as the Bible. So what distinguishes Harry Potter from Lord of the Rings or Star Wars or any other chosen one fantasy? It's Harry's endearing clumsiness, the sexual ticklishness between Ron and Hermione, Mrs. Weasley's embarrassing jumpers, etc., etc. It's the scores of subplots, subthemes, complications, jokes. Can these things pass the utility test? One could argue that these are not really subplots, but seamless extensions of the main plot. that the whole story expanded inside J.K. Rowling's mind as one idea, fully formed with its nails and cuticles bristling. That Rowling sat down to write not a generic chosen one story, but a specific chosen one story, fulfilling a specific need of an extremely specific reader. Which is to say, she reached out to the mediocrity in all of us, whose real parents are the Dursleys, and whose destiny is to be trapped in number 4 Privet Drive with Muggle jobs and Dudleys, all the while daydreaming of a messianic mission and of cooler parents who got lasered to death in a Pink Floyd concert. This would be true if J.K. Rowling were a market research algorithm. Even so, that does not explain the doubled motifs, the superfluous characters, the extra jibes. Was it really necessary for Neville Longbottom to have a character arc in the first book? Rowling does quite a bit of work, giving this ineffective buffoon the guts to stand up to his own friends. Was it truly necessary to materialize that wishing mirror or whatever thing through which Harry sees his dead parents? Other than to reflect the theme of orphanhood, it has no purpose. It's not instrumental to the plot. In fact, a large percentage of what made Harry Potter enjoyable would not pass the utility test. It would be the same for any other book or movie we could think of. Those weren't written by someone calculating to maximize the reader relatability quantum. They were written by someone who enjoys writing for the sake of writing. They were written because they were fun to write. Quite the same way a musician would squeeze in a little melody between chord changes, or a poet would extend a metaphor, or a symbolist painter would symbolize. You see, much of what resonates with us in art is just the artist having a lark. There is no need for David Gilmour and Rick Wright to wail and whimper for hours between Roger Waters's poli-sci paper. But then what would Pink Floyd's Animals be without that? A redundant mixed metaphor homage to Orwell's Animal Farm. But was Orwell's fiction necessary after his essays? Or was Orwell necessary at all after Yevgeny Zamyatin? So on and so on, all the way to the first word ever written, and the first drum ever pounded, and the first cave ever graffitied. Culture is not necessary. The essence of art is surplus vitality. Does this mean that we should not judge art at all? No, because we can't help but judge art. Like the good doctor said, vita brevis, ars longa, and bad art even longer. Which is why we seek out art criticism. So what should a review be in order to make a good recommendation? We already established that the verdict by itself is valueless. What else is there? The key is in what the doctor said. Hippocrates' aphorism in its entirety goes, life is short, art is long, opportunity fleeting, experimentation perilous, and judgment difficult. A novel or a film, just like a surgical procedure, is the recapitulation of generations of craftsmanship. Take a closer look at every sentence you write, every plot you rig up. In your similes, there will be Shakespeare's libido. In your humor, Swift's economy. In your narrator, Flaubert's free indirect speech. In your characters' heads, Joyce's inner language. In their dreams, Kafka's architectures. Just the same way a surgeon's every cut is guided by the entire corpus of anatomy. Except novelists get away with their murders. So a review, a worthwhile review, will determine the place a piece of art occupies in the canon. It will sift the artist's influences and see how much new territory has been explored. It will identify the techniques employed and see how well they're executed. You see, the metric for art is not commensurate with the metrics we have for other products of human labor, but we do have a metric. It's made up of the resources found within art. You don't need a degree to do this, but you do need knowledge to do this. And all the knowledge you ever need is out there for cheap. Just go to a bookstore, or a library, or an arts museum. Now you may ask, is cultural education necessary? Isn't it enough to judge art with your congenital nastiness, plus a meme, and maybe some sass? Well, all culture is acquired. We are all born with an aptitude for art, some of us more than others, and some of us might even be able to make out the circle of fifths, alone in a cave, listening to frog mating calls. But it certainly helps to lean on the progress of civilization, and it might be a better idea to pick up from others before us. Cultural education is especially essential to appreciate mature works of art, such as Vladimir Nabokov's Lolita or John Updike's Rabbit at Rest. These are writers performing at the peak of their powers. At this stage, they have learned to bury their influences and totally disguise their techniques. The puppets look so lifelike. They even have puppets of their own, and the hands of the puppet master are never to be seen. If you confront such a thing with only having read Harry Potter, you might wonder what the fuss is all about. So far, we have covered the minimum requirements for a review, all of which can be satisfied by an individual reader on his or her own time. Why should professional reviewers exist? If not for expertise, why do we go for their opinion? Simple. For entertainment. Just as culture has been refined by its practitioners, so has the review been. The most important ingredient of a review is style. And style is the only persuasive force a review will ever have to tilt you towards or away from another book. In order for a reviewer to merit our attention, the review has to be a standalone piece of art. This is Martin Amis's War Against Cliché, a book I consider essential for anyone interested in the book review as an art form. You may not agree with his verdicts, but you will be entertained. In some cases, more so than by the books that inspired those reviews. Some of Amis's sentences will resonate long after his targets have gone out of print. So the next time you come across a review vomiting all over your favorite book, just think, did the reviewer do the bare minimum? Situate the work of art in its respective canon. Then at least you will have a description of what to expect stylistically. More importantly, did the reviewer outperform the original author? Display restraint when criticizing garrulity, virtuosity when criticizing sloppy technique. In other words, did the reviewer entertain? As for the star rating or a score out of 10, it's meaningless. And that's all for today's episode of Underground Radio. What did you think? How would you review this review of reviews? Please type in the comments below. Let's talk. Until then, over and out. See ya when I see ya.